The Weeknd is currently experiencing some of the worst retroactive impact to his legacy that you can get as a celebrity. Like, literally the max amount you can get without having done something actually crazy, like catching yourself in an allegation. Nah, his only crime was making bad scripted media. He's apparently now 0 for 2 in his attempts to make it as a star on a big screen, and I say apparently 0 for 2 because I never watched The Idol. In this second go around, however, with the movie Hurry Up Tomorrow, it seems like the disdain from The Idol just barreled into a bigger hate crowd, especially when the public got a hold of that clip.
Shut up!
But you know the funniest part is that I don't think the movie is that bad. Don't get me wrong, it's no modern-day Godfather, but I feel like it carried enough substance that a 15% Rotten Tomato score seems a little extra. Even if the execution of said themes were pretty spotty. I know, it isn't as funny as just blindly hitting on the thing. And trust me, I am not the biggest Weeknd fan. I actively went into this movie expecting a solid 1 out of 10 that I could clown on in a video, but I sort of left thinking that it was a decent movie from concept alone. The movie is about the Weeknd himself and how he is coping with the loss of a woman. He has his passive hedonism with the classic drinking, drugs, and bulldozing through women before he is unexpectedly caught off guard by love. Now, we never actually meet this woman, as she has effectively removed herself from his life before the movie starts. But her presence is felt throughout the entire film, mostly through the Weeknd's irritability and irrational behavior. He grew so attached to this woman because she was a form of consistency in a life of chasing highs. But he himself is so ingrained into that way of living that he wasn't properly fit to take care of this woman. Her absence is now the thematic catalyst for this person behind the mask of the Weeknd, able to rid himself of this destructive moniker and return back to form. Because while he is crashing out over losing this woman, he also loses his voice due to a psychological disorder, leaving him unable to indulge into his typical coping mechanism of music. It effectively forces him to confront his destructive tendencies head on. The person that pushes him to confront these tendencies is this character named Enigma. It's highly speculated on if Enigma is even a real person or just a figment of the Weeknd's own mind, like how at the end of the movie, once he has effectively laid rest his destructive persona, she completely disappears. She goes unnoticed by practically everyone except the Weeknd himself and his friend Lee, who, spoiler alert, may also not be real as well. And one of the first things the Weeknd says when he sees her is that she looks familiar because she is essentially a reflection of him. Now, regardless of if she is real or not, there's no doubt that she does represent a piece of himself. More specifically, the introspective aspect of his mind. Her name being Enigma is a reference to Carl Jung's analytical psychology, which carries this belief that every person carries both masculine and feminine aspects to their mind. For men specifically, that inner femininity associated with emotions, receptivity, and intuition. In the movie, Enigma is a bag of mysteries, an enigma of a woman that sort of leaves destruction everywhere she goes, with setting a house on fire and rushing away being her literal introduction. This all leads to her encounter with the Weeknd, chasing after him as he loses his voice on stage. They have an intimate night together as Enigma tears up when the Weeknd plays an unreleased song, essentially saying that the song feels custom made for her. But as the daytime arises, it becomes disturbingly clear that the pensive function that Enigma serves is more layered than how one might have originally thought. As the Weeknd effectively disregards her by the morning, you see that Enigma wraps back around to also representing the many women that have been swept up and hurt by this artist's hedonistic attitude, lured into a night of pleasure and trauma bonding and reduced to unkept promises and a tick on his phone, with Enigma being unlucky lady number 0216. Which I thought was an oddly specific number until I looked it up and saw that it was the Weeknd's birthday. Yeah, this woman isn't real at all. Essentially, the longer the Weeknd denies his feminine self, avoiding truly introspective thoughts and finding that personal clarity, the longer he develops a tangible disconnect with the woman in his life. And it's not just through these random hookups, but expands into his maternal issues as well, being an extreme sore spot that is actually exploited by the elusive woman that breaks up with him in the beginning. This further draws parallels back to Enigma, who has her own maternal issues. She has one interaction with her mother on the phone, and it is of her being heavily scolded as someone who only brings destruction to wherever she goes, seemingly for the burning down of the house and leaving town. As Enigma pleads for her forgiveness and understanding, the Weeknd looks on, distant but still present during this entire situation. Frankly, it's an uncomfortable moment, but if you look just below the surface, you could paint another picture with the same colors. Just imagine a man facing his own inner guilt. that his hubris and reckless attitude while in the music industry have led to strained relationships, even before the first hookups ever started. His surface mind acknowledges that the hurt is there, yet portrays as if he isn't hung up on the strained connection, yet somehow he subconsciously can't stop thinking about it. Now, I want to take a step back for a second, because I mentioned that Enigma wasn't the only character that was speculated to simply be a figment of the Weeknd's imagination, as we also have the character of Lee. Lee is the Weeknd's best friend and also the driving force that keeps him performing when his crippling depression starts to take over. At first, Lee is portrayed as this truly supportive friend that wants to see the prosperity of his closest friend. But the longer we see Lee, we recognize that it isn't unyielding support, but rather conditional love. Lee loves the life that is provided from being friends with the global superstar, viewing the Weeknd's mental hardships as not a genuine trial that needs to be overcome, but more of an inconvenience, preventing Lee from being able to live vicariously through his friend. So all the moments of him giving pep talks, hyping the Weeknd up, are more show than substance. He gaslights, drugs, and even portrays himself as a victim in order to temporarily settle a pain that eventually reared its ugly head anyways. Now, Lee can be argued to also be a representation, but instead of serving as an extension of self, he is a representation of the actual music industry in their treatment of artists. How the industry thrives off the emotionally charged, hard-hitting music that makes people feel, and stellar performances that keep people engaged. It leads to this balancing act where they want artists to be broken enough to make strong music, but sane enough to put on a show and maintain the superstar image. And the best way this is maintained is through surrounding one with temporary pleasures when trying to build this image. Again, the money, the drugs, the women. Lee never actually wants Weeknd to be better because that's not optimal for the bottom line. Because a sane, healthy artist is going to then turn around and question the environment that has been cultivated around them. Now, a huge criticism of this film in particular is that it felt like an ego trip, apparently similar to The Idol, but again, I didn't watch it. And it mostly centers around the climax of the story, in which the Weeknd is trapped by Enigma, tied to his hotel bed as she plays his music and explains the meaning of it. Many frame this as the ultimate culmination of a wish fulfillment vanity project, but I don't know. I think it works with proper contextualization. In that moment, the Weeknd has been so entrenched within his delusions that it felt physically impossible for him to talk about his mental struggles. But if you buy into Enigma representing the more emotionally articulate part of himself, he's being confronted by himself to admit that he is truly hurting. While he may play into the act of having control, it's only him feigning ignorance, as his music is proof of his instability. So with Enigma explaining the depth of each song, she is forcing him to acknowledge that he isn't okay. Essentially saying that if nothing is truly wrong with you, why are your lyrics like this? Why do they repeatedly cover these same dark themes in such incredible detail? And why are you so against confronting these meanings past your music? It's only after that he completely breaks down and finally openly acknowledging his terrible mental state and horrific coping mechanisms that he finally arises from the bed a new person, burning up the moniker of the Weeknd and going back to Abel. One that is not only more enlightened of their actions and the residual effects, but one that is more aware when they're being a pawn in a system. I feel like the major element that is pushing people to be so, I would say, unfairly critical is that many aren't adjusting their mindset, watching it for what they think it should be over looking at what it's trying to be. Like, Hurry Up Tomorrow feels like one of those little skit interludes that music videos have to progress the song's overall themes, but just expanded out for an hour and 45. And according to interviews, that is practically what he was looking to do. A film to visually coincide with the broader themes of his album, Hurry Up Tomorrow, which in itself is the conclusion of a trilogy of albums and the effective end to the moniker of The Weeknd. So it's inherently less about having a traditional structure and more so being an all-out, messy deconstruction of his persona and the hedonistic lifestyle associated with it. And I gotta say, it is pretty messy and it's not in a good way sometimes, but it has a certain raw undertone to it that can be appreciated if you give it a proper chance. But the problem is that there's no way around it, but the man can't act. Was his bad acting blown out of proportion? Yeah, it was. He does have pockets of convincing moments, but you know, there's still the rest of the movie to worry about. It is very easy to overlook that passion in his intent when his acting abilities don't necessarily live up to the level of passion he is trying to portray. Those flat deliveries and almost lack of certainty in what he's saying is very apparent, especially when he has dialogue with literally anyone else. But the project's intent is still there. It's just mostly reflected in the film's symbolism. I truly believe that optics and baggage associated with The Weeknd in filmmaking were the true detriment of this movie. I mean, I literally cannot fathom how terrible his previous project had to be, because it's created this snowball effect to where the flaws of his movies were heightened to another level, and the aspects that were actually soundly creative are sort of just glossed over. Like, we can talk about the terrible pacing. We can talk about The Weeknd's acting, but why are we absurdly oversimplifying its pretty layered core themes, and why is no one talking about the stunning cinematography, especially the commitment to those one takes? I can't tell if it's a case of media literacy being so cooked nowadays that people just don't understand what's going on, a case of people being purposely obtuse because they don't like to give them any credit, or a case of people not actually watching the movie and just getting their opinions from others in that one clip and judging it based on that, or most likely it's some sort of combination of all three.